Meet Seth. He's a Toyota master technician, and he was one of the first to work on hybrid vehicles. I got him to sit down and interview with me and explain some of the inner workings of a dealership service department and why it is that hybrid owners sometimes get the shaft when their car needs service. When did you first become a mechanic?
I was 24 years old. It was 1999. That would have been about 11 years ago. So I've been doing this about 11 years.
Okay. What did you think it was actually going to be like versus how was it actually different?
Well, what I thought is you go to school, learn how to fix cars, and then you take what you've learned and you go and fix cars and you make money. It's a very highly skilled job. It's a very technical job. It's one that requires ongoing training because you always have new technology that's coming out. In the area that I live in, the population is increasing, so logically you should make money and it should be a lucrative career. In reality, though, it's quite a bit different. It turns out it's difficult to make money.
So why is it so hard to make money as a mechanic?
Well, it's hard to make money as a mechanic because at a normal job, you'd be getting paid hourly or salary. As a mechanic, you're paid on 100% commission. Now, what that means is you're paid for what you produce. And an example would be, if, let's say you need to replace a water pump on a car. Let's say it takes me 2 hours to replace that water pump. But when I go to look that the labor time up in a book, it's going to tell me it may be less than 2 hours to replace that. And I don't get paid 2 hours. I'd get paid less than 2 hours. And that adds up over time, and you tend to lose money. Like the example in the water pump. The customer's not going to complain about the water pumps failed on their car. They're going to complain that their car is overheating. Now, what I have to do is first figure out why the car is overheating. Is it a bad radiator? Has a hose popped off? Is there coolant leaking out of somewhere? And the first thing I'm going to have to do is a pressure test. Find out where the coolant's actually going out at. And that takes time. It takes about a half hour in the case of a water pump, and I'm not going to get paid for that. Other cars, with other diagnostic work, they could take several hours, in some cases several days if it's like an electrical problem. It can be very difficult to figure out what's actually wrong with the car, but all you're going to get paid for is the part that you replace on the car, the labor time that it takes to replace the part that actually failed. And that's why it can be very difficult to make money.
Okay, so how do you make money as a technician?
Well, as far as like your technical knowledge and your knowledge of automobiles really doesn't play that big of a part in making money. In many cases, what the mechanics that make the most money, they'll figure out ways to manipulate the system, specifically manipulating other employees, turning situations to their advantage, exploiting people. An example of this would be just a simple oil change. Some cars are easy to change the oil on, some cars are more difficult. So what some employees would figure out is that you can go up on the service drive, watch the cars that are coming through, and you see a car that's easy to change the oil on. Well, that's the one you want to do. So you might run up to that car and take that car to go back to change the oil on it. Now the customer may think that you're really energetic and enthusiastic about your job, when in reality it's you want that car because that's the easiest one to make the money on. And you leave the other cars that are harder to change the oil on for other employees. And that way you'd make more money and the other employees wouldn't make as much money.
How have things changed between now and when you first started as a technician?
Well, when I first started, the shop was mainly master technicians and oil changers, and then we would have a few apprentices who weren't very highly skilled, who were in the process of being changed. And you'd go in the future 10 years, and now what we have is, in many cases, a lot of the technicians that are coming in are just more or less right off the street, and you have just a few master technicians. And what happens is the master technicians typically have to do a lot of the diagnostic work because the poorly trained technicians just don't know what's wrong with the car. And as a result, in some cases, you can have it where a man that just changes oil can make more money than some of the technicians do, simply because he's able to work all day, whereas a master technician would simply be diagnosing cars all day. And one of the results is you get people that are highly skilled, but they make less money. And I think for as far as the industry is concerned, you get a lot of customers who their cars are getting worked on by technicians that don't have very much training at all.
So tell me a little bit about the warranty repair.
Okay, when a car comes in under warranty, you're pretty much working for a severely reduced pay rate. An example of that would be if a car needs an alternator. It may take an hour to put an alternator in. If a customer is paying for that out of their own pocket, they'd pay an hour worth of labor. If the car is under warranty, the warranty time may only pay us a half hour of labor, even though it takes us an hour to do the job. Now, there's other problems where, like, let's say a car comes in and it has a rattle. Basically, I'm going to drive the car down the street, listen for where this rattle is coming from, and then try and figure out what I need to do to stop that rattle. And in many cases, it's going to be putting a piece of felt or a piece of foam between two pieces of plastic. But the point is, since there's no part being charged out, you don't get paid anything for that. You've essentially repaired the car for free. And one problem is when you're doing warranty work, a lot of times the work is going to be rushed because the mechanic knows he's not going to get paid the full amount of time, so he's going to try to get it done as quickly as possible. And in many cases, you might not have the repair done as good a quality as it should be done.
So are there any shortcuts that technicians will take in order to try to speed things along a little bit?
Well, one thing is if you're replacing a part on a car and there's a bolt that was real difficult to get out and it's going to be difficult to put back in, well, you just leave that bolt off. If there's a bracket that's not absolutely necessary over a short period of time, in other words, if you just leave that bracket off, nothing's going to happen. Within a few weeks or so, it would take a few months before the part's going to bend out of shape. And you just leave that bracket off. Or if you have, say, watertight connectors that on a wire harness that's in the way, and you've got connectors all around the engine, it's going to take a long time to undo everything and get it out of the way to where you can get this part out of the car. So you might just cut the wires and then replace the part, and then you just have a few little wires that you need to splice back together, but they're not going to be watertight. So over a long period of time, that could cause the car to have electrical problems.
Okay, but what about when a car is out of warranty? Because I know that they charge often in excess of $100 per hour for labor.
Well, the dealership would charge over $100 an hour to the customer, but the technicians might make around, say, $20 an hour. But the thing is, we can a lot of times charge the full pay rate of what it would take us to do that particular job. And in many cases, if a car needs diagnosis, a lot of times we can get paid to actually diagnose the car, although it's taken on a case-by-case basis, and it depends on each different problem that a car has.
What are some of the types of things that the dealerships actually do in order to try to get more money out of the customers that come into the service department?
Well, for one thing, if a customer comes in and they simply want an oil change, one thing we try to do is offer a package deal where we could change a whole bunch of fluids, such as transmission fluid, differential fluid, brake fluid, power steering fluid, and get all that done at the same time. In many cases, these fluids don't necessarily need to be changed at that particular time. They might be fluids that are good for 100,000 miles. That's generally considered unscheduled maintenance that's done before the time that it needs to be done. Another thing, we are required to look the cars over. Anything that we find wrong, we're supposed to try to at least try to sell that to the customer. One of the more negative aspects of it, though, would be where a technician would essentially make something up where nothing's wrong with the car, but the technician says there is, and try to sell that to the customer.
Okay, so now on to the types of questions that relate to my type of business, which is tell me a little bit about hybrids and why is it that the technicians don't like working on the hybrids?
Well, generally hybrids are very reliable, and also they don't require a lot of repair work. So right there, you're not making a lot of money. The other thing is when they do break down, it can be very diagnostically intensive. And you typically, if it's under warranty, you're not going to be getting paid for the diagnostic time. A lot of times when you are diagnosing the car, what it comes down to is you just have to guess what's wrong with it. You really don't know.
Okay, but we've all read these stories on the internet about these people who take their hybrids, like a Prius or a Honda Civic hybrid or something like that, into the dealership, and it's out of warranty, and the dealership comes back with some astronomical figure of many thousands of dollars to repair their car, and yet they'll often get on the internet and gripe about this on one of the hybrid related web forums out there. And usually you'll get some hybrid expert and he'll get on there and tell them, oh no, you only need this little part fixed. It's going to cost you $100 or whatever. And sure enough, it'll be fixed. Why does that happen?
Yeah, well, one of the things is The cars can be hard to diagnose, mainly because a lot of the technicians, in many cases, don't have to work on hybrids that often because they don't break down, and also you're not trained very well to work on them. If you diagnose the car wrong, in many cases you can be held liable for it. So if you say the car needs a computer and you put that computer in, it doesn't fix it, you can be held liable. And also, you're not going to be paid to diagnose it. You're not going to be paid to replace that computer. If you recommend a whole bunch of parts that are related to whatever's wrong with the car, there's a good chance it's going to fix the car, and you're going to get paid to replace all those parts. And if the customer doesn't want to spend all that money, they want to take it somewhere else, well, good. You don't have to worry about the risk of diagnosing it wrong.
Okay, well, one of the most common things when I hear these stories is they'll always have this whole list of computer systems or ECUs that have been replaced in the car as part of the service. How often do these computer systems actually fail?
Well, in most cases, the ECU is not the problem, but you don't have a way of really knowing that for sure. Typically, what is the problem will usually be a sensor or an actuator or the wiring in between all these different things. But you really don't have much of a way of knowing for sure what's wrong. So if you recommend the ECU and the wire harness and the actuator and the sensor, you're pretty much guaranteed to fix the car. Well, the computers rarely fail, but they are easy to replace. And although they don't pay much in labor, they are quick and easy to put in there. So that helps us out with any little bit. Any little bit makes it easier for us to make money.
Okay. Well, why wouldn't the technician simply confront the customer and say, well, look, we don't know exactly what's wrong with your car, but most likely it would be this one part, so why don't we start with changing this part out first and see if that fixes the problem, and potentially save the customer a whole lot of money instead of just replacing them all at once like that.
Well, when the customer brings the car into the dealership, they figure the dealership, if anybody knows how to fix that car, it's going to be the dealership. And if we're the ones that know how to fix the car, well, we should be able to give them a definite answer pretty quickly. And when we tell a customer that it's going to take, we want to start with one part, and then if that doesn't fix it, go on to another part, well, many customers think it's a scam, when in reality, we're trying to do the honest thing. But a lot of times it doesn't work out that way.
So when was the first time you worked on a hybrid?
The first time I had to work on a hybrid, it was first generation Prius. The customer was complaining about a sizzling noise coming from the rear of the vehicle after taking it through a car wash. And I was still a trainee, so I was not actually authorized to work on the hybrids, although I was eager to learn about them. And the master technician, he pretty much knew he wasn't going to get paid anything on just to diagnose it, so he wanted to have me take all the carpets and all the stuff in the back of the vehicle out so we could get just to the hybrid components. So he could go in there and figure out what's wrong with it. So I had to, put on rubber gloves and be real careful. But technically, I didn't have any training either, and that was my first experience.
Do you think the auto industry is moving more towards hybrids?
Yes, I think the industry is moving towards more hybrids. I think that's good for consumers. We'll have cars that are more reliable, cars that are more fuel efficient. I think it's bad for technicians because we're not going to be able to make as much money. The cars aren't going to break down as often. They're not going to require anywhere near as much maintenance. And when they do break down, it's typically going to be pretty involved diagnostically. And we're not going to get paid for it. And in many cases, we're not going to know what's wrong with the car.
So we hear that Toyota is working with Tesla to produce some completely electric vehicles, probably like the RAV4 EV. Those will probably wind up in your shop eventually. How do you feel about those?
Well, let's see. I think it'll hurt the service industry because the technicians just simply aren't going to be able to make as much money. But I think overall it's going to be good for consumers. It's not going to hurt the sales industry at all. Consumers will have a more reliable car and a car that doesn't require as much maintenance.
So if in 20 years' time, most of the vehicles on the road are either hybrid or full electric, how's that going to affect your business?
I think in 20 years' time, the service industry is going to be very much like the fast food industry or discount retailer industry. It's pretty much headed that way already. Yeah, the technicians are not going to be very highly skilled. The main aspect of the business is going to be getting the cars in and getting them out as fast as possible. Not necessarily concerned that much with quality, just more with speed.